Well, I'm really going to talk the rest of the show today. I just want to talk about in this Columbus Day, this 528th anniversary of 1492, Columbus sailing the ocean blue, and just talking a little bit about where we are as a country and what's occurring in our country today. So I'm going to start with the idea, you know, this is not Christopher Columbus, but now moving forward to when you had the a little bit later explorers come, and you had the Pilgrim Colonies settling in what we now call New England. And we had the people coming over to New England who were seeking religious freedom. And so they came over to America and they established what eventually became the colonies, eventually became the United States of America. A lot of the anti-American left analysis that just kind of hateful of the idea of America, in addition to directing their hatred toward Christopher Columbus and what occurred as he came to exploring and discovering the New World, you have a lot of that same historical hatred directed at America's founders, directing at the very beginning of America. You have the New York Times bringing the 1619 Project, and so they're trying to say the beginning of America is when the first slave ships arrived, and so that defined America. You know, that is the identity of America, is a racist nation. But you've had historians talking about the idea that as the Pilgrims came to America, as the British came over to America, as the colonies grew, and you had colonies developing into more distinct areas, and you had the colony of Virginia, and you had New York, that as those colonies, those Europeans came over to America, you of course had the encounters between the British, the people now in America, the American citizens, who became American citizens, and their conflict with the Native American Indians. And so you have much attention paid, and today you have major lobbying groups arguing about whether certain land should be given back to certain Native American groups, whether all of America is kind of premised on the evil of Western European ideas being imposed on what was then a land filled with a multitude of different Native American tribes. And so you had, you know, they talk, obviously we hear a lot about the Pilgrims coming, and pretty soon the diseases that came over with the Western Europeans came to America. You had the Native Americans, their systems not ready to handle the diseases that were brought over from Western Europe. So you had death within Native American communities. You had wars between the settlers as they expanded westward in America, and they encountered more and more of the Native American tribes. And so you had that is a fact of American history. It's a fact of our country's history as we look at how we got to where we are today, the United States of America, you know, spanning from the Pacific to the Atlantic and spanning from our northern border with Canada and our southern border with Mexico. You had this land evolve into what is United States of America. And in the course of that history, of course, there were conflicts between the settlers, the Americans, settling and moving westward, and encountering the Native American tribes who had been there historically much longer. And so it's become trendy in the intellectual American left to be denigrating of American culture, of America's history, and basically denigrating the idea that who are we to say what we brought to America was a better thing? Who are we to say that the Native American tribes that lived here for centuries before the arrival of the Europeans, you know, who are we to say that we had any right? Who were we to take their land away? Who were we to take their land and engage in the wars that happened, of course, between between the Western settlers, the European settlers, and the Native Americans? You have people arguing about the Mexican citizens who there is a very large and active group claiming that a very large segment of America's Southwest, California, New Mexico, areas of American Southwest really truly still belong to people of the Mexican heritage, that was really their land, and that, you know, through wars, and it was, I mean, they had eras of history where they were predominant, they were in charge, they had laid claim, and they owned those lands. And so you had wars establishing those areas before we finally got to a continental American United States, what we have today. And what I want to get at, I'm getting at this idea, I know it's kind of a funny way to honor Columbus Day, but I really want to try to celebrate the unique greatness of America while taking into account the honest history of getting to where we are. So yes, it is true that as the Western European settlers came to what we now call the East Coast, came to the New England area, you had, as our civilization grew, as we had the country grow, we spread westward, and then we had various wars with Native American tribes, and eventually America became America with the borders that we have. And you have people saying today, well, we should be giving back this land to this group, giving back this land to this group. And I want to just say that I think that the extraordinary greatness of America is not recognized, not honored, not respected by the people making the arguments about the Native American tribes, making the arguments about the people of Mexican or Spanish descent who had control over various pieces of land that we now are in America. The simple fact is, of world history, world wars have been fought. Nations have been at war against nations since time began. Invading armies have taken over other areas, and then some other army fights back, and then a new invading army comes along. You've had royalty throughout the centuries that were ruling certain areas and trying to expand their own empires and claim what they had control over. It is not a unique thing to have as a history of a country that there were battles over land, that there were battles over pieces of geography. At some point, to have civilization, to have order, you have to have geography that is claimed and owned by one country, and you have to have sovereignty. Prior to the arrival of any Europeans on what we now call the United States of America, in pre-Columbian America, pre-Columbus coming here, there were tribes of all kinds all over what we now call the United States of America, regular, violent wars. It wasn't like it was a peaceful place and all these Native American tribes just, living blissfully. There were wars between the pre-Columbian tribes of various kinds, South America, North America. There were tribes that fought each other. They claimed land against each other, very, very violent wars. They had retaliatory wars because somebody took some land last time and someone took some land this time. And so you didn't ever have this blissful arena of American history where what we call America was just a peaceful cohabitation of a multitude of different Native American tribes. They fought for the same reason that wars occur around the world. They fought for territory, for land, sometimes when they had problems with not enough crops, not enough food, not whatever the reason was, they fought to take other territory. Somehow that history, that the Native American tribes and others throughout history have been violent, all that is lost on the intellectuals in this country who are still critical of the idea that we claim this land as United States of America. The United States of America, the unique greatness was, as the country was formed, what we created was unique in all of American history. This land that had been fought over by people who'd come up from the South, from the Spanish and Mexican heritage, whether you had Native Americans here, there were wars and battles happening all over the world. But what happened in America's history, in the creation of America, when you had the settlers coming over here, you had the beginnings of an ordered life. You had the beginnings replicating in part what was happening in England, because England by then, they had the Magna Carta, they had developed some more sense of rights and sense of law for the people. But what happened on this very land that is the United States of America was the creation of a country based on ideas, not based on race, ethnicity, national origin, not based on the clobbering by, one army over another army. You had instead a country that was built on and came from its very beginning built on ideas of the rights of man. That's what the founding of America was. Yes, it had history, battling and wars with Native Americans and violent conflicts between Native Americans and this and that in various areas and the settlers who came here. But what America finally did, back at the time of our founding, was to create a country that actually laid the groundwork, laid a premise for the idea that every individual man and woman has a right to live in freedom. Every individual man has a right, has God-given rights because they were born to live in freedom. You have the right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. This was the whole idea of the Declaration. We and our forebears set in motion the idea that individuals on this planet Earth have the right to live in freedom. And that the entire purpose of government is to protect freedom, is to protect those God-given rights. The entire purpose of government is to allow we the people to emerge as the government. We the people are the government under this extraordinary system developed in America. Obviously, Christopher Columbus could not foresee this when he came here in 1492, but the whole development of world history allowed, and people who wrote, you had philosophers writing, you had ancient philosophers, you had thinkers of various kinds throughout history writing and pondering the concept of whether or not people have the right to live in liberty, whether or not it is fair and right to have laws that are imposed on one set of people but not on other people, whether or not it's right to have a monarchy with an inherent, because you were born into the royal family, you have the right to rule, whether that's right or not. You had deep thinkers throughout the centuries and millennia contemplating these ideas, and you got to a place on this globe, on this planet, now called the United States of America, where you had thinkers of the depth and seriousness and a sense of being learned, having read about these ideas, that actually talked about and thought through, what if you could start fresh? Start fresh. Not be a country that was majority of some ethnicity, and then some other country of a different ethnicity took them over, and so now you have, whatever it's going to be, the Germans ruling the Italians, or this group ruling that group. All throughout history, the battles were ethnic, they were religious, they were the idea of the invading Muslim armies taking over in waves, taking over, springing out of the birth of Islam, and then spreading throughout that part of the world in violent overtaking of other countries. You had in America the idea of these tremendous thinkers, these founders of America. What if we can start fresh and say, we have no invading armies, we have no ruling ethnicity, we have no monarchy, we have no descendants of the kings and queens deciding for us. We are going to found a country with the very power held by we the people. It was an extraordinary idea, an extraordinary, unique, powerful idea, even back at the time of our founding. As we were still, back in the era of before the Declaration of Independence came along, people here were British citizens for the most part. The British, the other ethnicities were here, but mostly these are people of British descent, and they were British subjects, and they were really okay with being British subjects. A lot of them thought, yeah, that's pretty cool, England is a really powerful country. We came here for religious freedom, and, we have more religious freedom here, but, we're still British, we're still subjects. But you had, because of the tyranny and irrationality of King George, and the presence of extraordinary thinkers in our country, you had the birth of the idea that you could have a country rooted in basic ideas of the right of the individual man, the God-given from the scriptures right of the God-given right of man to live in freedom. So what we had in the founding of America was this most extraordinary notion that we are going to create a country unique in all of world history. They wrote down their ideas in the Declaration of Independence. Basically, all men created equal, endowed by their creator, not the king, not the government, not majority opinion, not the ruling invading army, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. That's the founding of America. So we fight a Revolutionary War, we get rid of England, we create a Constitution, and again, the Constitution, I often say about the Declaration of Independence, people say it's the birth certificate of America. I always say it's the single most important document in all of world history after the Bible is the Declaration of Independence. But then we get the Constitution, and the people, the great thinkers, were onto the idea, in order to make this idea live and have consequence and meaning, you have to create a structure of government that protects all of these rights spelled out in the Declaration of Independence. You have to create it's a construct. We have the idea, the Declaration, the Constitution, the building blocks, the construct. It had enormously important ideas in it. It had the idea of the rule of law. Everyone is subject to the same rule of law. The law applies to everyone. No exceptions for the kings and the monarchy. The same laws apply to everyone, and laws are created by the government, which is we the people. We make the laws because we elect members of the House and Senate at the federal level, and in every state, as we continue to evolve, states have elected legislatures. So we the people get to make our laws because we choose who makes the laws. That was the idea of keeping the power in the hands of we the people. Moving forward, the Constitution had all sorts of other enormously, and again, learned scholars who had read and thought about these ideas recognized you have to have separation of powers. You have to have the legislative branch, which is we the people elect the members of Congress and the Senate who make laws. The executive branch, the branch that enforces the laws. So you have the governors, the president, the executive branch, the whole monstrosity, unfortunately, of the federal bureaucracy in Washington. And then you have the judiciary, and that is the judges, the courts, state and federal level. And the whole concept they got from the beginning is you have to separate these things. Because if any one person gets to be the lawmaker, the law enforcer, and the judge of those laws, you're back to tyranny. The Constitution was a boulder in the road to try to stop the development of tyranny in this country. The Bill of Rights is the same kind of thing in this country. The Bill of Rights, it spells out, you have the right, the very First Amendment, you have the right to freedom of religion. You have, all of the rights, in fact, I have both the Declaration and the Constitution sitting here with me. And I was, on the Bill of Rights thing, we talk about just a few of them, but they were deeply thought through at the time they were passed, because they were ideas that are setting in stone, tying back to the idea of the Declaration, that we're going to have a country where we're going to live up to the promise of we the people having individual liberty. The government does not have the right to control your life. The government has limited powers, limited by the Constitution, limited by the power of the people to elect government, and we do not start with the premise government can rule in any arena it wants to. We start with the premise the people are the government, and we elect legislators, and they make laws, and their power, even where the categories of life where they're allowed to make laws, is limited by the Constitution and state constitutions as well. And I'm getting all around this to say, among the many extraordinary things, and I've said it in my show before, but, I could move to the country of Italy, and I could follow all the laws in Italy and to become a citizen. And I could pass a citizenship test and become a citizen of Italy. But I can never be Italian because I'm not Italian by background. I can never become Italian. I could become a citizen. But everyone can, in this world, become an American. Because becoming an American has nothing to do with race, ethnicity, or national origin. Nothing at all. It has to do with these ideas that created America. That's what America is. It's a country rooted in these ideas, and it's a country because of those ideas and what the system that flowed out of these ideas. We created the free market economy, the strongest, most robust, and most productive, reliable, lifting up the poorest among us. We've said many times on this show, the poorest among us in America live better than something like 2/3 of the rest of the world. We had freedom that brought prosperity. free markets and capitalism are tied to the idea of freedom. They're not just a random economic idea that is equally valuable or respectable as socialism or Marxism or communism. Free markets, capitalism, entrepreneurship, they're rooted in, they're the only possible system you can have if you're willing to honor the idea of foundational freedom in America. That is what free markets are. And a point I want to get to, many points today, because we're at this point in 2020, it's almost inconceivable that where we are, where everything about America's founding is on the ballot in 2020. And I'll explain some more what I mean by that. So to start with, the economic system that made America the most productive, abundant nation, the source of, the statistics, when they rail them off sometimes, read them off sometimes, America is the source of the vast, overwhelming majority of inventions and patents and copyrights because of freedom. Because freedom inspires people to go out and create things and invent things and make a company that can do something different and do something better. And in America, the government is not going to tell you can't do that. And in America, if you work hard and you make the proverbial best mousetrap or the best new invention or the most attractive clothing, whatever arena you work in, you are rewarded by your fellow citizens because they want what you created, and you're rewarded because they want to buy it from you. Your hard work provides the needs for others, so you're working to supply the needs of your neighbors, and they want what you produce, and so they pay you. There is no other system consistent with the founding freedom of America except free markets and capitalism. And yet we're at the verge where we have the left in this country has mainstreamed socialism, Marxism, communism. Do not let them dupe you into thinking these are really very distinct ideas and we could be socialist but not Marxist, or we could be socialist but not communist. No, my friends, all of those ideas, socialism, Marxism, communism, they are all antithetical to the promise of freedom of America. They're all antithetical. You cannot have the founding freedom of America, the whole idea, the freedom of the individual to thrive and dream and work hard and achieve and then keep the rewards of their labor, if you surrender the power to the government that is required to institute the tyranny of socialism, Marxism, or communism. Government becomes tyrannical under those programs. It always happens. It doesn't matter whether you have a really nice politician like Hugo Chavez promising in Venezuela, I'll make everything free and I'll take control of the healthcare system and the schools and the industries. Just give it all to me. I'll make it all perfect. And people got sucked in and duped and thought somehow we're going to surrender our freedom, but don't worry, under socialism and then communism, everything's going to be fine and we're still going to be prosperous. Those ideas destroyed Venezuela, not because Hugo Chavez was a bad guy. He was a bad guy. But because the ideas he brought to that country destroyed it. The ideas the left is trying to inflict on America will destroy America. It will destroy our abundance. That's one battle we're in this country and this 2020 election cycle. Understanding you can't have the abundance of prosperity, and the left lies all the time and says, oh yeah, the rich have abundance. No, the poorest of Americans live better than most of the rest of the world because capitalism, freedom, brings everybody up with it. That's what happens. That's the fact. Another battle for the founding ideas of America that the anti-American left is just stridently engaged in is to define America in silos of race, ethnicity, national origin, and skin color. It is the left's operating assumption that every single person, because of your gender, every single person, because of your gender, because of your race, ethnicity, or national origin, you live in this silo, and they will tell you, because you are African American, you better think this, because you're Asian American, you are this, because you're Hispanic American, this is who you must be and what you must believe, and because you're a woman, this is what you must think. The entire beauty of the founding of America is antithetical to the racist siloing of America, the racializing of America that is happening under the American left today in our country. The anti-American left lives to divide America by race, ethnicity, national origin, and tell you because of your skin color, because of where your grandparents were born, because of the language your great-grandparents spoke, that you must believe these things, that you're a victim. The left lives to create the next victim class. The very foundational idea of the left is antithetical to the founding ideas of America, the founding ideas of each of us having rights from God because we were born, and the right to live in life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. In fact, a lot of what the left is doing to this country and their racialization and their siloing of America is driving us backwards into the time when America was tribal. When we have Native American tribes, no legal connection to each other, no governing authority, no sense of rule of law, no concept other than brute force to decide who wins. When we had the Native American cultures, Native American tribes in this country, you had in pre-Columbian America, you had endless wars between Native American tribes. No governing authority, no order, no agreement on a set of laws. What America did in bringing the concept, the final concept of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, is uplift America and everyone blessed enough to live here, to uplift America to a higher idea of the rights of man and the identity of man. Your identity is not your skin color. It is not your tribe. It is not your race. It's not your national origin. Your identity as an American, if you're blessed enough to be an American, your identity is as you have the heritage of freedom given to you by our founders to pursue your dreams, your life, your liberty, your pursuit of happiness. All of that is antithetical to what the left is trying to do to this country. Completely antithetical. You can't have the America of the founding and the racializing, siloing of America that the left is selling. Also in this 2020 election cycle, we have in this country a growing intolerance for religious freedom. That growing intolerance of religious freedom goes hand in hand with the left's embrace of socialism. Throughout human history, every time a socialist, communist power entity or group comes to power, among the first things they do is round up the priests, round up the church, and kill them, put them in jail. There is ongoing in China today. It is not coincidental that in China that is still committed to communism. The Christian church is consistently under persecution, consistently under being arrested, the government of China knocking down churches, literally bringing wrecking balls and knocking down churches, arresting priests, arresting Christians, rounding them up. This attitude of intolerance toward religious faith goes hand in hand with communism and socialism. It is why in socialist countries, Romania, another great example, in the country of Romania, when they went through their phase of communism, they finally overthrew Ceausescu, but along the way, they had communism destroying religious faith, destroying the rights of religious people, outlawing religion in some cases. The entire point of freedom in America and religious freedom is the idea that religious freedom comes from God. That's what the founders were saying. That's why they put it as the first freedom and the First Amendment. Religious freedom comes from God. It's your God-given right. Socialists, communists, Marxists, in varying degrees, are intolerant of religion because when religious people actually believe the faith they are learning, they can't be manipulated and controlled to the degree that socialists and Marxists need to control the people. Socialism, Marxism, communism, the whole ugly isms are all about tyrannical government controlling people. They're all about the starting assumption of society is government is in charge and we'll tell you how much freedom you can have. America is the idea that you have God-given freedom, and we tell the government what they are allowed to do, what their limits are. We tell the government that they cannot limit our freedom. And so in this era in 2020, we have growing intolerance for religious freedom in a whole host of ways. We've talked about it many times on this show. We've talked about the First Liberty Organization in Dallas, Texas, that takes the cases for representing religious freedom. So we have people whose religious freedom has been challenged. You have that entity and other entities, Alliance Defending Freedom, another one of them, taking the cases of people who are being persecuted because of their faith, the government's finding their faith intolerable, not wanting to tolerate it. You had, just one little example, you had a high school football coach fired because after every game, as he had promised God he would do before he took the job, he took a knee, got down on his knee to thank God after football games. He didn't make anybody else do it with him. He did not condition his players' right to play on the team, if they want to join him or not. It was very private, but this one story is a great example of the concept. It was changing in American law. What is changing in our country is that there was actually a willingness on the part of the school district, and this is in, I think, Bremerton, Washington, the school district, to fire this coach, tell him, because you're a representative, you're an employee of the public school, because you're the coach, you're not allowed to show any religious expression. You cannot be praying, even after the game's over, the crowds are dispersing, people are going home. He's wanting to go out to the field and take a knee and thank God for the safety of his players, for whatever happened in the game, and fired for it. You have people being told what kind of business they are required to do. You have bakers and florists and people who provide all sorts of services for weddings being told they have to violate their religious freedom, violate their religious views related to marriage, or else the government is going to shut them down. These may seem like small examples. You're thinking, well, you still have religious freedom. You still get to go to church on Sunday. Hey, they're not knocking down churches. But these are the steps along the way when you start to agree that religious freedom is something the government regulates and decides. So the government can tell a baker in Colorado, we're shutting your business down if you won't bake a cake for same-sex wedding, even though you believe that violates your religious freedom. It's on the horizon. It's right in front of our faces. We have assaults on religious freedom in this country. We have the anti-American left in this country in countless ways telling you they fundamentally disagree with the founding idea of America, the founding values of America. You have courts in this country filled with left-wing judges who simply don't follow the law. Left-wing judges who you had President Trump come into office after being duly elected, coming into office and issuing an executive order with the intent of keeping the American people safe from terrorists who might be coming to our country from countries filled with radical Islamic terrorists. You had a president trying to protect the American citizens. You had no question of any kind under federal law. No question that the president 100% had authority to issue that executive order. He had the right under the Constitution and the right under federal law, unequivocal, no questions asked, and yet you had President Trump have to go through numerous iterations, having federal judges along the way, federal district court judges and federal appellate court judges refusing to follow the law and instead following the left-wing agenda that says we don't like President Trump and we want to stand in his way. These are bigger questions than whether you do or do not like the executive orders, whatever you think about those executive orders. The bigger question, why I'm raising it in this conversation today on Columbus Day, is you have an American left that simply believes they have the right to put judges into federal court positions who will do the bidding of the left-wing agenda of this country, who no longer feel compelled to simply stick with following the rule of law, following what the federal law says or the state law, following the Constitution. They are using their positions of power in courts to put forth a left-wing agenda inconsistent with their job as the judiciary, the 1/3 of the three branches of government. I could go on, but we're about out of time on this Columbus Day. I told you I'm pre-recording this. I wanted to do a show that was relevant no matter what happens over the weekend or happens on Monday. But I do want to plant this seed as I wrap up the show today. There has never been a more important election in America than this year, than 2020. You have the Communist Revolutionary Party of America openly saying, this is our chance. We are watching. This is our chance to take over America. They see that they are allies with the Democrat Party. It is no longer the Democrat Party, and over here the Democrat Socialists, and over here the Communists. These leftist ideologies have melded and merged in the last 10 years or so. Melded and merged into an anti-American leftist bloc that does not believe in freedom of religion, does not believe in the fundamental individual right of freedom that is guaranteed in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, that does believe in socialist and eventually communist government, that believes in tyrannical control at the federal level, growing power over the lives of individuals. And these represent substantial changes, not just incremental small changes, what the left would bring to America just in the Green New Deal, just in the Green New Deal, just in their allegiance to their support for the Marxist organization Antifa, the Marxist organization Black Lives Matter, the notion of defunding police, the notion of throwing out the rule of law. And so you have the rule of judges who don't follow the law. We could not be at a more alarming and deeply consequential time in this country. The left in this country is no longer the left of John F. Kennedy, who actually believed in the rising tide lift all boats, who actually believed that cutting taxes and freeing people to develop free market ideas would help everyone, who actually talked about the idea, ask what you can do for your country. There's no John F. Kennedy in today's Democrat Party. There's no moderate Democrat leading that party. There's no moderate Democrat in charge of the platform or the ideology or the legislation the left will bring to this country. It is that serious in this election cycle. These are not just political battles between someone who has a D by their name and someone who has an R by their name. It's a battle over the idea of whether or not we in 2020 can hold on to the promise of 1776, the promise of the idea that we each have rights from God because we were born, we are all equal, we have rights from God to pursue our version, our understanding, our individual desire of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have the crushing of religious freedom. We have, through political correctness, the crushing of free speech. We have the entire COVID takeover of America, crushing all sorts of individual rights and freedoms. And we have a left willing to use that in an ongoing way to continue to change the culture of America, the society of America, the fabric of our country, change it into a country where we feel we are going to wait to be told by the government what we can do. And that is the new America, the new normal the left has coming for you this election cycle. It couldn't be more important to understand where the left is coming from. It couldn't be more important to understand Kamala Harris, most liberal senator, more liberal than Bernie Sanders based on her voting record. She is, as they say, would be a heartbeat away from the presidency. She's as radical, anti-American, leftist, racialized society, intolerance of religion, intolerance of freedom, intolerance of the freedom of healthcare, has openly said she would support not just the takeover of the healthcare system by the government, but the elimination of all private insurance. She's advocated for that. People, it's an amazing thing. I'm wrapping up on this Columbus Day special show, but it's so important to understand we're not making a decision between whether you like Trump's personality or you like Biden's personality better. It's not about personality. It's not about who gave a better speech. It's not about who tweets too much or any of those kinds of issues. It's about, do you understand the fundamental freedom of America is on the ballot in 2020. It is incumbent on every American to understand this and to vote to preserve America. That was what the election is about in 2020.